Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we take complex research and break it down into the vital insights you need to know. Today, we're jumping into a really critical topic, the mental health of our companion animals. Our mission here is pretty direct. We're synthesizing the best veterinary and behavioral resources to give you a shortcut to seeing those super subtle signs that your dog or your cat is dealing with distress, anxiety, or even depression.
And we really need this deep dive. There's a huge knowledge gap we have to talk about, and the stakes are, well, they're incredibly high. The research is pretty compelling. It suggests that up to maybe 75% of dogs show some signs of anxiety. But here's the kicker.
Okay.
When you look at whether owners can actually spot those signs, the number drops to about 36%.
Wow.
So we have this 40-point gap, and bridging that gap is fundamental to improving their welfare.
That statistic is staggering. It really means most of us are probably missing the most critical early indicators.
Absolutely. So let's start with the foundational principle in all of this, the essential diagnostic rule, medical first.
Non-negotiable.
It's completely non-negotiable. Because behavioral changes, a new aggression or suddenly hiding or house soiling, they're almost never just in the animal's head. They are often the very first and sometimes the only sign that there's an underlying medical problem. Pain, dental disease, something systemic.
And that has to be ruled out by a vet before you even think about behavior modification.
Before you do anything else.
Okay, so that's a huge point. Let's unpack how perfectly pain can mimic a behavior problem. So if you see uncharacteristic aggression, right, an owner might think their dog is suddenly being dominant or just getting old and cranky.
Right. But if they're suddenly snapping when you try to pet them, it could easily be dental pain or arthritis. Think about it from their point of view. If moving a certain way causes a sharp pain, they learn to react aggressively before they get touched to prevent it.
It's a protective measure.
It's pure self-protection. And you see it with restlessness, too. Pacing in an older dog isn't always anxiety. It could be that they just can't get comfortable because of chronic joint pain.
And in cats, that can look different.
Very different. In cats, that kind of frantic activity could point to hyperthyroidism or even cognitive decline. Both are medical issues.
And house soiling, that's a massive one that needs a vet visit like yesterday.
Immediately. If your cat stops using the litter box, the odds are very high. It's a physical issue. It could be a UTI, kidney disease, or something called FLUTV feline, lower urinary tract disease.
And they're not doing it out of spite.
Never. What happens is the cat starts to associate the litter box itself with the pain of urination. So they're desperately trying to find a place where it doesn't hurt to go.
I find the sign of targeted licking really easy to miss. You see a dog just constantly focused on their knee or paw. You just assume, oh, it's a habit or maybe allergies.
But that specific obsessive licking is such a powerful indicator of localized pain. They are trying to soothe a painful joint. It absolutely requires a vet to check it out.
And you said cats are masters of disguise. How does this medical first rule work with them when they're so good at hiding everything?
It's incredibly challenging. An owner might see their cat isn't grooming anymore because their coat gets matted and they just chalk it up to laziness or old age.
Or do they stop jumping on the couch?
Exactly. And the owner thinks, oh, he's just slowing down. But what that really means, most of the time, is that jumping is now incredibly painful. It's a huge red flag for arthritis.
Okay, so once the vet gives the all clear medically, then we can start looking at the silent language of emotional distress. And here's the first big distinction you pointed out. Dogs tend to externalize. They get active, they bark, they pace.
Whereas cats tend to internalize. Their go-to is withdrawal, hiding, and just stillness. And if you look at their energy levels, it becomes really clear. For dogs, anxiety often looks like frantic, compulsive pacing or circling. They just can't settle.
Even if they're exhausted.
Even if they're exhausted. Depression, on the other hand, looks more like lethargy. No interest in walks, no interest in toys, that classic sad, droopy-eyed look. Cats, though, they cope by hiding. Prolonged hiding, sleeping way more than usual, or becoming hypervigilant.
Hypervigilant.
Yeah, they're constantly scanning the room. They startle at the smallest sound. They can't get into a deep, restful sleep because they're always on edge.
And stress hormones, especially cortisol. You mentioned they can mess with the digestive system. So appetite is another big clue.
It's a huge clue. Stress can suppress appetite, even cause nausea. But you can also see the opposite. Some animals will start gorging, overeating, as a way to comfort themselves.
And there was a very specific, subtle sign you mentioned for cats with mouth pain.
Yes. This is a great one to know. If your cat suddenly refuses to eat crunchy food, but will still eat soft food, that's not just them being picky.
Hmm.
That is a massive sign of dental pain, and it warrants an immediate vet check.
Okay, now let's get into the psychological coping mechanisms because I think these are the most misunderstood. The sources call them displacement behaviors.
Right, or stereotypies. These are basically repetitive, non-functional actions that animals do when they're under chronic stress or frustration.
This is a way to burn off that nervous energy.
Exactly. You see tail chasing, flank sucking in dogs. In cats, the classic is over-grooming, what we call psychogenic alopecia.
Where they got those symmetrical bald spots on their belly or their legs.
Perfect symmetrical bald spots.
So here's what's so interesting. Why do they do this? Why does chasing their tail or licking themselves raw actually feel better to them?
Because the physical act itself releases endorphins in their brain
A natural pain reliever.
and a mood elevator. It's a temporary chemical fix. It gives them a momentary feeling of calm in their frantic internal state, which is why it becomes such a hard habit to break.
And dogs also have this whole other language of subtle cues, what specialists call diffusive behaviors.
These are those low-level signals that say, I'm uncomfortable. A yawn when they aren't tired. A lip lick when there's no food around.
So when a stranger comes in and the dog starts licking its lips.
That's a stress signal. Or shaking off when they're not wet.
Hmm.
Or turning their head to avoid eye contact. They're all ways of saying, this situation is making me anxious and I'd like it to stop.
So we see a yawn and think sleepy. They mean I'm stressed.
Precisely. And for cats, we just have to say it again. Pathological hiding is not normal feline independence. If your cat is living under the bed, that is a sign of profound chronic distress. All right, so now that we know what distress looks like, let's talk about the triggers. What is it that disrupts their stability?
And when we talk about stressors, we're talking about anything that throws the animal out of what's called homeostasis, right? Can you break that down?
Of course, homeostasis is just that internal balance all living things need. It's a stable, calm, optimal state. When a stressor happens, the animal has to use energy to get back to that balance.
But if the stressors are constant,
They never get back to baseline. And that chronic imbalance is what causes all the problems. And unpredictability is a massive stressor, especially for cats. They need routine. Even small shifts, like changing their feeding time or moving furniture, can be hugely distressing because it erodes their sense of control.
we all recognize the big, loud stressors like fireworks or construction. But another one you mentioned from the sources is welfare deficits.
Which is really just a technical term for boredom.
Right.
A lack of mental or physical stimulation is a known cause of depression and anxiety. If you have a high-energy dog that needs a job to do and you don't provide one, that frustration builds up.
And that's when you see destructive chewing or digging.
Exactly. They're trying to self-soothe or burn off that frustrated energy.
Social dynamics are also huge. We all know about separation anxiety in dogs with the howling, destroying things by the door.
And for cats, in multi-cat homes, you see a lot of stress from resource competition. Not enough litter boxes or food bowls too close together. It creates this constant low-grade fear for the cat that's lower on the totem pole.
And this is so important, emotional contagion. The owner's stress becoming the pet's stress.
This is a key insight from the deep dive. Dogs are incredibly attuned to us. They're not just hearing our tone of voice, they're picking up on our heart rate, our body chemistry.
So if you're chronically stressed, they feel that.
They interpret that as a constant danger in the environment. So a lot of the time, fixing the dog's anxiety means the human has to work on stabilizing their own emotional state first.
It's worth pausing here to say, we're not just talking about them feeling uncomfortable. This has a real physical toll, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. When the body is constantly flooded with stress hormones, it causes long-term physiological damage. So addressing their anxiety isn't just about their comfort, it's about their physical health and their lifespan.
So let's get to the action plan. What does this all mean we should do? Treatment seems to have 3 pillars: environmental management, behavior modification, and medication. But the first rule across all of them is that punishment is a definite no. Why is yelling or using things like shock collars so harmful here?
Because anxiety is driven by fear. Punishment just pours gasoline on that fire, it increases their fear, it destroys their trust in you, and it never ever fixes the underlying cause.
It just makes everything worse, so much worse. Effective treatment is all about building predictability and trust. And that starts with consistency. A stable, predictable daily routine is one of the most powerful anti-anxiety tools you have.
So consistent feeding times, walk times, that kind of thing.
Exactly. For cats, just scooping the litter box at the same time every day can dramatically reduce their stress.
Okay, let's talk species-specific enrichment. For cats, you said it's all about control and choice.
Control is everything for a cat. That means lots of resources. The rule is one litter box per cat plus one extra. And they need safe hiding spots and vertical space, like cat trees.
So they can get up high and survey their territory.
It gives them a sense of security and command.
And for dogs, enrichment is more than just a tennis ball, right?
Much more. We need to engage their minds. Puzzle feeders are great, but so is structured training and scent work. A simple 10-minute find-it game is incredibly calming for a dog because it satisfies that natural foraging instinct.
Which brings us to the third pillar,
Mm-hmm.
medication, things like fluoxetine or gabapentin. What role do these actually play? They're a tool, not a cure, and they should always be prescribed by a vet. What medications like fluoxetine do is they work to change the brain chemistry over time. They essentially turn down the volume on the animal's anxiety.
So they're not in that constant state of panic.
Right. And that makes them mentally available to learn new, better behaviors through training. The medication doesn't fix the problem, but it makes the animal receptive to the fix.
That makes sense. It raises their stress threshold so they can actually learn.
Precisely.
Hmm.
And a very important safety note here. The oral use of diazepam, a benzodiazepine, in cats has been linked to rare but potentially fatal liver problems.
Yeah.
Always, always work closely with your vet.
It really all comes back to being fluent in their silent language, ruling out pain first and understanding that key difference. Dogs externalize, cats internalize.
It does. But if there's one central takeaway from all this, it's that chronic distress causes real, long-term physical damage.
Not just emotional discomfort.
Not at all.
Yeah.
That constant flood of stress hormones can lead to recognized diseases. In cats, you see feline idiopathic cystitis, a painful bladder inflammation. In both, you can see IBD or stress colitis. It suppresses their immune system.
Wow.
So if we learn their language, if we really see what they're telling us and address the root causes of their anxiety, we're not just making them more comfortable. We are actively protecting their physical health and extending their lives. We owe them that.